Hey Reddit, I've been lurking here for ages, reading about other people's family drama and thinking mine couldn't be that bad. But now, I'm finally ready to share my own story. Honestly, just typing it out is a huge relief. My name is Alex, and if I had to sum up my family dynamic in one word, it would be unbalanced. My parents, James and Emily, didn't just have a favorite child. They had the favorite child. My younger sister, Lyla, was their golden girl. She was the apple of their eye, the child they adored, supported, and bragged about endlessly. Me? I was practically invisible, the kid who got just enough attention to keep me breathing, but never enough to feel like I really mattered. Lyla was one of those kids who just lit up a room. She had that magnetic energy, always talking, always laughing, always charming everyone around her. From the moment she could walk, my parents treated her like a miracle. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one. I loved books, drawing, and working on little projects in my room. I didn't demand attention, and I guess that made me boring in their eyes. At first, I didn't realize how deep the favoritism ran. When we were little, Lyla got more toys than I did. I figured it was because she was younger, and they were just trying to keep her happy. But as we grew up, the pattern was undeniable. It wasn't about her age. It was about her being the star and me just being there. Birthdays were a prime example. When Lila's birthday came around, my parents would throw these extravagant parties. Balloons, gifts, cake, the whole 9 yards. For mine, it was a single cake and a mumbled happy birthday before they switched the conversation back to whatever Lyla was doing. I still remember the year I asked for a new set of art supplies. I loved drawing, and I'd been dreaming of getting something more professional. Instead, I got a pack of generic pens from the dollar store. Meanwhile, that same year, Lyla got a shiny new bike for her birthday. The material stuff hurt, sure, but the emotional neglect was even worse. One time in middle school, I brought home a report card full of straight A's. I was so proud, I thought this had to get their attention. I showed my mom, hoping for a "great job, Alex," or even just a smile. She barely glanced at it and said, "That's nice," before turning to gush about Lyla scoring 2 points in a middle school basketball game. Lyla wasn't even that good at basketball, but somehow, those 2 points mattered more than my entire year of academic success. This kind of thing happened constantly. If Lyla took an interest in something, my parents were all in. They'd sign her up for classes, buy her the best gear, and cheer her on relentlessly. When I showed an interest in something, it was a different story. I remember telling them I wanted to open a little online shop to sell handmade crafts. I'd been saving money for supplies and needed just a little help to get started. My dad laughed and said, "That's a waste of time. You should focus on something practical." A few months later, Lyla announced she wanted to start a fitness brand. Suddenly, my parents opened their wallets. They bought her equipment, paid for a professional website, and even hired a designer to create her logo. I sat there, watching them shower her with everything she needed, and I couldn't help but wonder, why did she get everything handed to her while I had to fight for scraps? By the time high school rolled around, I'd stopped expecting anything from them. Lyla was their entire world, and I was just a ghost, haunting the background of their lives. They were so focused on making sure she succeeded that they didn't even notice me pulling away. Lyla, of course, loved being the center of attention. She was smug about it too. If I got a new pair of shoes, she'd laugh and say, "Finally retiring those hand-me-downs?" If I tried to join a conversation at dinner, she'd talk over me and steer it back to herself. My parents never called her out. If I complained, they'd say, "Don't be so sensitive, Alex. She's just joking." One memory from my senior year stands out crystal clear. I entered a regional competition for small business ideas. I spent weeks preparing my pitch, designing prototypes, and perfecting my presentation. When I won first place, I was on top of the world. I rushed home, my heart full of hope that maybe, just maybe, my parents would finally be proud of me. I told them the news. My dad barely looked up from his laptop and said, "That's nice. Have you seen Lila's new logo, though? It looks so professional." My mom didn't even glance at me. That night, I cried. Not because I wanted their approval anymore, but because I realized I'd never get it. That was the moment I decided. I needed to get out. I couldn't keep living in a house where I was overlooked and undervalued. I started making plans to leave as soon as I graduated. But of course, leaving wouldn't be easy. My parents had invested so much in Lyla's ventures that they didn't have anything left for me. When I told them I wanted to move out and pursue my own business dreams, they shut me down immediately. My dad said, "We can't spread ourselves too thin. Lyla's business is the future of this family." It felt like a slap in the face. They couldn't even consider my ambitions. That's when I knew I was on my own. Once I realized that no one was going to help me, I knew I had to do it all on my own. I wasn't waiting for anyone to hand me opportunities. I was going to create them myself. But, like most things in my life, I had to keep it quiet. I couldn't go around telling my parents I was working on a business, especially when they couldn't care less about my dreams. I kept my plans under wraps. I saved every penny I could. I worked part-time jobs after school, tutoring, babysitting, and even some freelance gigs online. I'd lie to my parents about what I was doing. Just volunteering at the library, I'd say, or I'm studying at a friend's house. They didn't ask any questions. They were too busy watching Lyla's every move to pay attention to what I was up to. With the money I saved, I started teaching myself everything I could about running a business. I watched late-night tutorials about marketing, web design, and product sourcing. It wasn't glamorous work, but it felt like a breath of fresh air. For the first time in my life, I was doing something for myself. My computer became my best friend. Sometimes, when my parents would walk in, I'd minimize the screen quickly, like I was doing something wrong. But honestly, I loved it. It felt like I was finally in control of my own future. I didn't want to create anything groundbreaking. I just wanted to make products that people would appreciate. Things like custom-designed mugs, tote bags, and stationery that appealed to niche audiences. It wasn't the kind of business that would set the world on fire, but I believed in it. I spent hours researching trends, designing mock-ups, and finding a supplier who would work with me on a budget. When I finally made my first sale, just $15 for a custom mug, I almost cried. Someone actually bought something I made. That was a bigger deal than it sounds. Meanwhile, Lyla's business was, well, a disaster. Every time she came home from one of her meetings, which usually meant hanging out with her friends, she'd complain about how hard it was to get clients. But instead of being held accountable, my parents would just throw more money at her problems. They bought her new equipment, hired a marketing consultant, and even rented out an office space for her. It was maddening. She didn't have to lift a finger, and they were treating her like she was some kind of entrepreneurial genius. And there I was, working my ass off in my tiny bedroom, trying to build something from scratch. By the time I graduated high school, things were moving faster than I'd expected. My online shop was growing thanks to some clever social media marketing and word of mouth. I'd join niche forums and groups where my target customers hung out, subtly plugging my products without being too pushy. Slowly but surely, orders started to come in. I didn't tell my parents, of course. They assumed I was still trying to figure things out. When I told them I wanted to move out, they barely reacted. My dad said something like, "Good for you. Maybe now you can help Lyla with her business full-time." I just smiled and nodded, hiding the fact that I wasn't moving out to help her. I was moving out to start a new chapter, far away from them and their expectations. I found a small office in another state. It wasn't much, just a single room with peeling wallpaper and a creaky chair, but it was mine. The day I signed the lease was one of the happiest moments of my life. For the first time, I felt free. I set up my office, rearranged the furniture, and organized my inventory. It was hard work, sure, but it felt right. This was mine, my business, my space, my future. One of the first things I did after I moved was expand my product line. I started offering personalized notebooks and planners, and they became a huge hit. I also began taking bulk orders, like custom corporate gifts or wedding favors. The business took off faster than I'd imagined. By my second year, I was able to hire a part-time assistant to help with packing and shipping. Meanwhile, my parents still thought I was just working a side job. They never asked for details about what I was doing, and I never offered any. It was almost laughable how little they cared about my life. Lyla, on the other hand, was sinking deeper. Her business had completely collapsed. The office my parents rented for her sat empty most days, and her website hadn't been revised in months. My dad tried to keep propping her up, but even he was starting to sound tired. By the time I hit my 3rd year in business, I was making more money than I'd ever imagined. I had multiple revenue streams, a loyal customer base, and even a few partnerships with local retailers. More than the money, though, I felt vindicated. All those years of being ignored and dismissed had led to this moment. My parents had put everything they had into Lila's future, and she had let them down. Meanwhile, I built something from nothing. But here's the kicker. They still didn't notice. I'd come home for holidays and my dad would ask, "So, Alex, when are you going to get serious about your career?" I had to bite my tongue to stop myself from laughing. Did he not realize I was already serious about it? I was thriving, but they couldn't see it. Then one day, as I was sitting in my office, going over emails and planning my next product launch, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number, and for some reason, I picked it up. "Hey, Alex, it's Dad," he said. I froze. My dad never called me unless there was something he needed from me. I leaned back in my chair and answered, "Hey, Dad, what's up?" There was a long pause before he started talking, and when he did, I could hear the desperation in his voice. "Well, Lila's got another business idea, and we're all pitching in to help her get started again. She really wants to get it right this time." I sat back in my chair, trying to keep my cool. Of course, it was about Lyla, it always was. "Really?" I said, not bothering to hide the skepticism in my voice. "Another business idea? After the last one flopped?" There was an uncomfortable pause on the other end of the line before my dad finally spoke up again. "Look, Alex, don't laugh. We thought it would be great if you could come home for a family meeting. You know, brainstorm with us, help Lyla get this thing off the ground." I could feel my stomach churn. I didn't even have to ask. I knew exactly what this was about. It wasn't about family, and it wasn't about helping Lyla. It was about them once again needing me to step in and fix the mess they had created. "You want me to help Lyla with her business?" I asked slowly, trying to keep my voice steady. "Don't laugh, Alex. She's learned a lot since the last one failed. Family should stick together, especially in times like this." I almost let out a bitter laugh, but I held it in. I didn't want to get into it with him. Not yet, anyway. "Dad, with all due respect, why would I help Lyla now? You've never once asked for my help before." He sighed deeply on the other end. I could almost hear the frustration in his voice. "Alex, it's not just about Lyla. It's about the family's reputation. People are talking, you know. They're starting to wonder why Lyla can't seem to make anything work. If we all come together, we can help her turn this around. We'll shut them up, put everyone's minds at ease." And just like that, it all clicked into place. It wasn't about Lyla. It wasn't about family either. This was about appearances, about saving face. I couldn't keep the bitterness from creeping into my voice. "So this is about you and Mom not looking like failures in front of your friends, isn't it?" "Don't be like that, Alex," he said, his tone shifting, probably trying to sound like the caring father he never really was. "We've sacrificed a lot for you two. Don't you think it's time you gave a little back?" I could feel the old resentment rising, but I pushed it down. "I'm not coming home to help Lyla. I've got my own business to run. I don't have time to play cheerleader for her." The silence on the other end was almost deafening. Then, finally, my dad spoke again, and this time his voice was sharp, almost angry. "Well, if you don't come back, we'll stop supporting you financially." I couldn't help it. I let out a short laugh, one that wasn't the least bit funny. "Stop supporting me? Dad, you haven't supported me in years. I've been doing just fine on my own." There was a long pause, and I could practically hear him processing what I said. Finally, he spoke again, his voice filled with disbelief. "What are you talking about? We've been sending you money for school, for living expenses." "Newsflash," I cut him off. "I didn't go to college. I've been running my own business for the past few years. I'm doing just fine." There was another long silence. I could hear him breathing heavily, probably trying to figure out if I was messing with him. I wasn't. I'd been keeping it quiet, but now it was out in the open. "You've been Running a business? He asked, his voice barely a whisper, like he couldn't wrap his mind around it. All this time? Yep, I said flatly. I'm making more than enough to support myself. So no, I won't be coming home to help Lyla, and I won't be bailing anyone out. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end, followed by a click. He hung up on me, just like that. I sat there, staring at my phone for a few moments, processing everything. Part of me felt like I had just burned the last bridge I'd ever have with them. But honestly, I didn't care anymore. I was done. The next day my mom called. I knew it was coming. She always followed up after Dad tried to manipulate me. Her voice was softer than his, but I could hear the desperation in it. Alex, sweetheart, we need to talk. About what? I asked, already dreading the conversation. She sighed dramatically. It's about Lyla and about your father and me. We're really worried about her. She's been under so much stress lately, and your dad and I, we don't know what to do. We thought it would mean a lot to her if you came home and supported her. I couldn't stop myself from rolling my eyes. She was playing the worried mom card, but I knew better. This was just the same old game, just in a new package. Mom, I'm not coming home, I said firmly. I have my own life now, my own business. Lyla's problems aren't mine to fix. She sniffled, and for a second I almost felt guilty. But then she went on. But we're family, Alex, she said, her voice breaking. We can't just turn our backs on each other. Please, we need you. You need me now? I said, my voice cold. Where were you when I needed you? When I was invisible? When you only cared about Lyla? I could hear her take a shaky breath, but I wasn't letting her off the hook. I'm not going to drop everything just because Lyla needs another bailout. This is on you, Mom. It always has been. Alex, please don't be like this, she said, her voice pleading. We just want what's best for everyone. We've learned from our mistakes. I wasn't buying it. No, you want what's best for Lyla. You always have. I heard her sniffle again, but I didn't feel bad. I'm not coming home. I have a life now, a real one, and I'm not going to let you drag me back into this mess. I've learned my lesson. Before she could respond, I hung up. That was it. I was done. The phone was quiet for a few days, but then, the next week, I got another surprise. It wasn't from my parents this time. It was Lyla. A few days after my conversation with Mom, I got an unexpected visitor. It was Lyla. She showed up at my office looking, well, a little different. Not in a good way. Her hair was messy, she had dark circles under her eyes, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. For a second, I almost didn't recognize her. Alex, she said, her voice strained, like she wasn't used to talking like this. Can we talk? I didn't move, didn't invite her in. I just stared at her for a long moment. The old resentment flared up in my chest. After everything, all the years she'd ignored me, made me feel worthless, rubbed her success in my face. Now she was standing here asking for my help. I had every right to turn her away, to tell her to figure things out on her own, just like I had to. But something in the way she was standing there, looking completely defeated, made me pause. I sighed, pushing the irritation aside. What do you want, Lyla? She hesitated, sitting down across from me, and I noticed her hands trembling slightly. For a second, I wondered if I'd ever seen her look this vulnerable. It made me feel a little strange, but I didn't let it show. I know we've had our issues, she started, her voice soft. I know I've been a jerk to you. And I get it, okay? I do, but I need your help. I raised an eyebrow. Help? What could I possibly help you with? She looked down at her hands, clearly struggling with whatever she was about to say. I screwed up. Big time. The business. It's failing. And now Mom and Dad are blaming me. They're saying it's all my fault. They've sunk everything into it, and now we're all screwed. I don't know what to do. I was quiet for a long time. I wanted to tell her that this was her mess, that she'd created it, and now it was time to clean it up. I wanted to remind her of all the times she'd put me down, made me feel like nothing. But instead, I just sat there and listened as she continued. I thought I could do it, she said, her voice cracking slightly. I thought I could make them proud, you know? But now it feels like everything's falling apart and they're turning on me. I don't know who to turn to, Alex. I need someone to have my back. Please. I closed my eyes for a second. Part of me wanted to shout, to tell her it wasn't my problem anymore. But another part, the part of me that still remembered her as my sister, the girl I grew up with, felt a flicker of sympathy. She wasn't the same confident, smug person she'd been when she was always the golden child. She was lost. And honestly, for a moment, I didn't know what to do. But the truth was, no matter how much I wanted to walk away, I couldn't completely shut off the part of me that cared. That was the thing with family, right? No matter how much you've been hurt, you can't entirely erase those years of connection. They're still there, even when you wish they weren't. You know, I said slowly, you could have asked for my help years ago. You could have treated me like I mattered. But you didn't. You made it clear that I was just the background character in your perfect little world. Her face tightened at that, but I didn't care. It was the truth, and she needed to hear it. She needed to understand how much she had hurt me. I'm sorry, she said, looking down. I was an idiot. I didn't realize how much I was hurting you. I should have done better, Alex. I looked at her for a moment, considering, but then, just as quickly as that moment of sympathy came, I shook it off. You can't just say sorry and expect everything to magically fix itself, Lyla. Sorry doesn't make up for all those years of making me feel like I was invisible. Sorry doesn't change the fact that you, Mom, and Dad have spent years ignoring me while you built your little empire around you. She looked like she wanted to say something, but I cut her off. I'm not your savior. I'm not going to fix this for you. I've already done that. I've already fixed my life without any help from you or anyone else. I've worked my ass off to get where I am, and I'm not about to drag myself back into your mess. Her shoulders slumped, and I could see how much that hurt. She looked like she was about to break, and I almost felt bad for a second. But then I remembered all the years of neglect, all the times I'd been overlooked, and the anger I'd buried deep inside. You don't understand, Alex, she said softly, her voice cracking. I'm not asking for you to fix it. I just need you to care. I just need you to not hate me anymore. I looked at her, feeling an overwhelming mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to tell her that I couldn't just flip a switch and go back to the way things were. Part of me wanted to remind her that she didn't deserve forgiveness, not after everything. But there was another part, the part that had been hurt for so long, that wanted to see her truly understand what she had done. I'm not here to play the hero, I finally said. I've built my life on my own, and I'm not going to let you drag me into this again. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I don't care about you. I can't keep putting myself last for you anymore, Lyla. She nodded slowly, like she understood, but I could tell she was disappointed. She stood up, her face a mixture of frustration and something that looked like regret. I guess I deserve that, she said quietly. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, Alex. I really am. Yeah, I said, letting out a breath. I know, but sorry doesn't fix everything. She walked out of the office without another word, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I didn't feel any sense of satisfaction. There was no grand moment of redemption, no happy ending. It just felt empty. She was still the same person and nothing had really changed. I'd done what I could. I'd said what I needed to say. But now it was time for me to move forward, away from them, and focus on what I had built. And I knew that meant leaving the past behind. For good. The weeks that followed were quieter than I expected. After Lyla left my office that day, I didn't hear from her for a while. I didn't know what she was doing, and honestly, I didn't care. I had my business to run, my life to focus on, and I wasn't about to let the chaos of my family drag me down again, But as life tends to do, things took another unexpected turn. One afternoon, a few weeks after Lyla's visit, I came into the office to find a letter waiting for me. An actual handwritten letter. It wasn't an email or a text. It was real paper, folded neatly and sealed in an envelope. I hadn't gotten a letter like this in years. My curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it, It was from my mom, As soon as I started reading, I realized it wasn't just a letter. It was a cry for help. She talked about how much she and my dad missed me, how they regretted everything that had happened. She mentioned how proud they were of what I'd accomplished, even though they hadn't shown it before. Then, as I read on, the tone shifted. She wrote that things at home had only gotten worse. My parents had lost the house. They had over-leveraged everything to fund Lyla's business ventures, and when those failed, they couldn't keep up with the mortgage payments. They had been evicted and were now living in a tiny apartment on the outskirts of town. And to make matters worse, Lyla had run off, leaving them behind. She'd taken what little money she had left and moved to another state, cutting off all contact. The final part of the letter was the hardest to read. My mom was begging me to come home to help them rebuild their lives. She said they didn't have anyone else to turn to. She said they had learned their lesson and wanted to make things right. I sat there for a long time, the letter in my hands. Part of me wanted to believe her. Part of me wanted to go back and fix things. But then I thought about all the years I spent invisible, all the birthdays I spent alone while they fawned over Lyla, and how, when I finally broke free, they hadn't even noticed. I thought about all the times they had ignored me, put Lyla on a pedestal, and dismissed my efforts. And I realized that nothing had really changed. They were asking for help, but they still hadn't fully acknowledged what they'd done to me. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't just erase the past, and I wasn't sure I could ever fully forgive them. But the thought of them struggling, really struggling, left me conflicted. A few days after reading the letter, I got a call from my aunt, the only relative I kept in touch with. Her voice was low and hesitant when she spoke. "Alex, I don't know if you've heard, but your parents are in serious trouble." I was already bracing myself. "I figured," I said, not bothering to hide the lack of sympathy in my voice. "They lost the house." She hesitated, then continued. "It's worse than that. Your dad had a big argument with one of his old clients, and it's turned into a lawsuit. They're being sued for damages. If they lose, they'll have nothing left." I rubbed my temples, trying to process it all. I felt bad for them, in a way, but I also knew that I couldn't be their safety net anymore, not after everything they'd put me through. Still, I couldn't ignore the voice in my head telling me I should do something. They were my parents, after all. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I knew I couldn't swoop in and fix everything. That wasn't my job anymore, but I realized that maybe, just maybe, I could give them something they didn't deserve. Closure. Not to fix the past, but to give them a fighting chance to fix their own future. The next day, I called my mom. She picked up on the first ring, and there was an edge of relief in her voice when she spoke. "Alex, sweetheart, is it really you?" "Yeah, Mom, it's me," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "I just wanted to talk." There was a long silence before she spoke again. "Oh, thank God you called. I've been praying you would. We miss you so much, Alex. We're so sorry for everything." "I know you're sorry," I said, feeling a tightness in my chest. "But that doesn't change what happened." "I know," she said softly, her voice breaking. "I don't know how to fix this, but I want to try. Please, Alex, I need you to understand. We've learned our lesson. We know we messed up." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I'm not coming back to fix everything, Mom. I've built my life. I've worked for everything I have. But I'm not going to leave you high and dry. I'll help you, but only if you're really willing to change." There was a pause, and I could almost feel her holding her breath. "We are, Alex. We promise. Whatever it takes, we'll do it." I knew she was desperate, but part of me needed to hear those words. I needed her to prove that they weren't just saying what I wanted to hear to get what they needed. "Okay," I said, exhaling slowly. "I'll help you, but it's not going to be easy. I'm not just going to throw money at the problem. You have to take responsibility for your life now. You have to show me that you can handle things on your own." "I promise we will," she said. "We'll do whatever it takes, Alex. Just please help us." I hung up, feeling a strange mix of emotions, relief, guilt, and maybe even a little hope. I had set boundaries, something I had never done before with them, and now I could only hope they would respect those boundaries and follow through. A few days later, I drove to their new apartment. It wasn't much. The walls were bare, the furniture was mismatched, and the place smelled faintly of mildew. But it was theirs, and they were still standing. When I knocked on the door, my mom answered first, her face pale but hopeful. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears. "Alex," she whispered, stepping aside to let me in. "Thank you for coming." My dad was sitting on the couch, flipping through some papers. He looked up when he heard my voice. "Alex, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice gruff. I didn't sugarcoat it. "I'm here to help you, but you have to understand something. This is the last time. I'm not your safety net anymore. You have to learn how to stand on your own." They both nodded, silent and stunned. I sat down, and we talked. We went over their finances, and I helped them set up a budget. I paid off some of their smaller bills and arranged for others to be consolidated. But I made it clear that this was only temporary. They had to take responsibility from here on out. It wasn't easy. There were tense moments. My dad had a hard time swallowing his pride, and my mom kept apologizing for everything. But I stood firm, reminding them that the past couldn't be changed. They had to move forward, no matter how hard it was. A week later, things were looking a little better. They were looking for part-time jobs, and they had started taking their budget seriously. I set up an online bill payment system for them to make things easier. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. I didn't know what the future held for us. The road to rebuilding trust was long, and I wasn't sure if it would ever truly be repaired. But for the first time, I felt like I was in control of my relationship with my family. I wasn't the little kid begging for attention anymore. I was standing on my own 2 feet, and I was finally ready to close this chapter on my terms.